Hi, I'm Linda from English Learning Mind Map. Today, we will learn about Roger Federer. Roger Federer. Writers often attempt to epitomize and transcend ordinary biography when they describe Roger Federer, because his story extends far beyond sport and enters the realm of cultural memory, where achievement becomes meaning and performance becomes identity. Over the course of his career, he did not simply accumulate victories, he reshaped how excellence itself is perceived, blending elegance with precision and composure with relentless effectiveness in a way that appeared effortless yet was deeply constructed. Roger Federer refers not only to the individual athlete, but also to the symbolic figure formed through years of performance, character, and global admiration. To epitomize expresses representing something in its most refined and complete form, and Federer came to embody balance, fluidity, and technical mastery at the highest level. To transcend suggests moving beyond conventional limits, and his influence extended far beyond tennis into culture, inspiration, and collective perception. His presence redefined expectations, showing that dominance could coexist with humility, artistry, and respect. As the root of this structure, Roger Federer provides the central axis from which all other aspects of the story unfold, each layer revealing how such a remarkable identity was gradually constructed through environment, discipline, challenge, and adaptation. This journey begins not with trophies, but with Swiss foundations, where the underlying structure of his character quietly took shape. Swiss foundations. Beneath Roger Federer, Swiss foundations helped anchor and shape the qualities that later defined his composure, discipline, and understated excellence, forming a silent but powerful framework beneath everything he would eventually achieve. Long before global recognition, he developed within a cultural environment that emphasized precision, neutrality, and restraint, values that were not imposed forcefully but instead absorbed through daily life and quiet expectation. Swiss foundations refers to this broader social and cultural landscape of Switzerland, including its emphasis on order, reliability, and self-regulation, all of which subtly guided his behavior as he matured. To anchor suggests establishing a stable and dependable base, and this environment provided Federer with emotional steadiness even in moments of uncertainty or pressure. To shape refers to gradual formation over time, and these influences molded his personality into one defined by calm control rather than outward intensity, allowing him to respond rather than react. Unlike environments driven by spectacle or emotional extremes, this setting encouraged internal discipline, clarity of thought, and measured action, all of which later became visible in his playing style. Swiss foundations, therefore, does not simply describe where he came from, but explains how his behavior became so consistently composed under pressure. This quiet strength, built over years of subtle reinforcement, allowed him to remain balanced even when facing the highest stakes. From this stable base, the narrative naturally moves into Basel Childhood, where these broader cultural influences were translated into lived experience and personal development. Basel Childhood. Within Swiss foundations, Basel Childhood allowed Roger Federer to absorb and internalize the rhythms, habits, and subtle expectations of everyday life in a structured, yet quietly supportive environment, where development unfolded naturally rather than through force or pressure. Growing up in Basel meant experiencing a balance between order and freedom, where routines provided stability while personal exploration was still encouraged, creating a setting in which discipline could coexist with curiosity. Basel Childhood refers to this formative stage of his life, long before global recognition, when identity was shaped through repetition, observation, and interaction rather than ambition. To absorb suggests taking in influences through continuous exposure, and Federer absorbed patterns of behavior, social norms, and emotional responses simply by participating in daily life. To internalize moves deeper, indicating that these influences became embedded within his instincts, shaping how he would later react under pressure without conscious effort. This node builds directly upon Swiss foundations by translating abstract cultural principles into lived reality, showing how values such as composure and patience became intuitive rather than imposed. At the same time, Basel Childhood preserved a sense of play and experimentation, ensuring that structure did not eliminate spontaneity, but instead provided a stable platform from which creativity could emerge. This balance between control and freedom would later define his distinctive playing style, where precision and improvisation coexisted seamlessly. From this grounded and formative environment, the influence of his multicultural household further expanded his perspective, adding adaptability to the stability already established. Multicultural household. Expanding from Basel Childhood, the multicultural household allowed Roger Federer to synthesize and mediate diverse cultural influences in a way that added flexibility and perspective to the stability he had already developed, creating a more layered and adaptive foundation for his identity. Growing up within a family that combined different cultural backgrounds meant that he was exposed not to a single fixed worldview, but to a range of traditions, expectations, and communication styles that coexisted and interacted on a daily basis. The multicultural household refers to this dynamic environment in which identity was not defined by uniformity, but by integration, where differences were not obstacles, but resources for understanding. To synthesize suggests combining distinct elements into a coherent whole, and Federer developed the ability to integrate contrasting influences without conflict, forming a balanced and unified sense of self. To mediate involves navigating and balancing differences, and he learned early how to adjust his perspective depending on context, maintaining harmony without losing clarity. This node deepens Basel Childhood by demonstrating that his composure was not rigid or inflexible, but instead adaptable and responsive, capable of adjusting without destabilizing. These early experiences later became visible in his global interactions, where he could communicate effortlessly across cultures and connect with audiences from different backgrounds. His universal appeal, often described as natural or effortless, was in reality rooted in this early exposure to diversity and balance. The multicultural household, therefore, did not simply enrich his upbringing, but fundamentally enhanced his ability to operate in complex, international environments. Moving upward from the multicultural household through Basel Childhood to Swiss foundations, his development then turns into junior formation, where personal adaptability began to align with structured athletic discipline and focused ambition. Junior formation. Moving upward from the multicultural household through Basel Childhood to Swiss foundations, junior formation allowed Roger Federer to cultivate and refine his tennis abilities in a more structured and intentional manner, marking the point where natural talent began to align with disciplined progression. What had once been playful engagement with sport gradually transformed into a focused pursuit, where repetition, correction, and incremental improvement became central to his daily routine. Junior formation refers to this transitional phase between casual participation and serious athletic development, where potential was no longer simply expressed, but actively shaped. To cultivate suggests nurturing growth over time through consistent care and attention, and Federer's abilities were steadily developed through practice, guidance, and exposure to increasing levels of competition. To refine goes further, indicating the process of enhancing precision, removing inefficiencies, and improving control, and during this period his strokes, timing, and decision-making became more deliberate and reliable. This note expands upon Swiss foundations by showing how personal flexibility and awareness could now be directed toward a clear objective, allowing him to adapt not only socially but also technically. The balance between structure and creativity, already established in his earlier development, became especially important here, as rigid training alone would not have produced the fluid style that later defined him. Instead, junior formation represents a careful blending of discipline and individuality, where guidance shaped his progress without suppressing his natural instincts. This stage also introduced the first real experiences of pressure, competition, and expectation, all of which contributed to strengthening his mental resilience. From this increasingly focused environment, his development intensified further within the National Training Center, where structure became more demanding and independence more necessary. National Training Center. Extending directly from junior formation, The National Training Center required Roger Federer to relocate and acclimate to a far more demanding and structured environment, where expectations increased significantly and personal responsibility became unavoidable. What had previously been a guided and somewhat familiar progression now shifted into a system designed explicitly for elite performance, where routines were stricter, competition was sharper, and independence was essential. The National Training Center refers to this institutional setting in which promising young players were developed through disciplined schedules, professional coaching, and constant evaluation. To relocate means moving away from a known environment into a new and often unfamiliar one, and for Federer this step required leaving behind the comfort of home and adapting to a setting defined by higher expectations. To acclimate goes further, describing the process of adjusting both physically and mentally to new conditions, including intensified training, greater pressure, and the necessity of self-management. This node builds upon junior formation by transforming structured development into sustained discipline, where consistency was no longer optional but required. The emotional challenge of separation, combined with the physical demands of training, forced him to develop resilience and independence at an early stage. At the same time, this environment exposed him to peers of similar ambition, raising the standard against which he measured himself. The National Training Center therefore represents a critical escalation in his development, where potential was no longer simply refined but tested under pressure. Moving upward from the National Training Center through junior formation and Swiss foundations to Roger Federer, his journey then progressed into professional ascent, where preparation would begin to translate into visible success on the global stage. Professional ascent. Moving upward from the disciplined environment of the National Training Center through junior formation and Swiss foundations to Roger Federer, professional ascent marked the phase in which Roger Federer began to ascend through the ranks of professional tennis and announce himself as a serious presence on the global stage, transforming preparation into performance. What had once been development now became exposure, where results were visible, judged, and compared against the best players in the world. Professional ascent refers to this transition from promising junior to emerging professional competitor, where potential was tested in real competition under increasing scrutiny. To ascend suggests a gradual but steady rise, and Federer's progress was not defined by sudden dominance, but by consistent improvement and growing confidence. To announce indicates making one's presence unmistakably clear, and through his performances he began to signal that he was no longer merely participating, but actively challenging the established order. This node demonstrates how structured discipline could produce tangible outcomes, converting preparation into measurable success. At the same time, this stage introduced new forms of pressure, including expectations, visibility, and the unpredictability of competition at the highest level. His ability to remain composed, rooted in earlier development, allowed him to navigate these challenges without losing stability. Professional ascent, therefore, represents a critical turning point, where identity shifted from internal development to external recognition. The balance between patience and ambition became essential, as progress required both persistence and belief. From this rising trajectory, his journey moved into tour breakthrough, where early signs of potential would transform into definitive statements of capability against elite opposition. Tour breakthrough. Building upon the momentum of professional ascent, Tour Breakthrough marked the decisive phase in which Roger Federer began to disrupt the established hierarchy of professional tennis and outmaneuver opponents who had long dominated the sport, transforming potential into undeniable presence. What had previously been incremental progress now evolved into moments of clarity, where his abilities were not only visible but impactful against the very best. Tour Breakthrough refers to this stage where early promise crystallized into meaningful victories, signaling that he was no longer an emerging player but a legitimate contender. To disrupt suggests altering an existing structure, and Federer's performances began to challenge the stability of the rankings by defeating players who had previously seemed unassailable. To outmaneuver involves overcoming opponents through strategy, anticipation, and intelligent execution rather than brute force, and his style relied on timing, placement, and adaptability rather than sheer power. This note extends professional ascent by showing how preparation and gradual improvement could culminate in defining moments that shift perception. The psychological dimension of competition became increasingly significant as belief began to replace uncertainty and confidence grew through experience. At the same time, these breakthroughs brought heightened attention, increasing both opportunity and expectation. Tour breakthrough, therefore, represents the transition from possibility to proof, where ability is no longer questioned but recognized. From this pivotal stage, his journey advanced into Wimbledon Coronation, where success would be elevated into symbolic achievement and lasting validation. Wimbledon Coronation. Emerging directly from the momentum of tour breakthrough, Wimbledon Coronation allowed Roger Federer to consecrate his arrival at the highest level of tennis and validate his position among the sport's elite, transforming recognition into undeniable legacy. What had previously been a series of impressive victories now converged into a singular moment of symbolic importance, where success was no longer temporary but deeply established. Wimbledon Coronation refers specifically to his first Wimbledon title, a tournament long associated with tradition, prestige, and the highest standards of excellence in tennis. To consecrate suggests elevating something to a revered and almost sacred status, and this victory placed Federer within a lineage of champions whose names defined eras. To validate means confirming the authenticity of achievement, and this triumph demonstrated that his success was not accidental or fleeting, but the result of sustained development and capability. This note builds upon tour breakthrough by converting proof of potential into confirmation of greatness, marking the point where perception shifts permanently. The emotional significance of this moment extended beyond the trophy itself, as it represented the fulfillment of years of preparation and the beginning of a new identity. At the same time, this achievement introduced a different kind of pressure, as expectations expanded alongside recognition. Wimbledon Coronation, therefore, stands not only as a victory, but as a transformation, where success became responsibility and promise became expectation. Moving upward from Wimbledon Coronation through tour breakthrough to professional ascent, his development then continued into technical maturation, where excellence would be stabilized and refined into consistent dominance. Technical maturation. Moving upward from the defining moment of Wimbledon Coronation through tour breakthrough to professional ascent, technical maturation enabled Roger Federer to stabilize the brilliance that had brought him success and orchestrate his game into a consistently reliable system, transforming flashes of excellence into sustained control. Where earlier stages of his career had been marked by moments of inspiration and variation, this phase focused on reducing inconsistency and aligning every component of his game into a cohesive whole. Technical maturation refers to the period in which skill was not only refined but structured, allowing creativity to exist within a stable framework rather than as isolated expression. To stabilize means making something steady and dependable, and Federer gradually reduced unforced errors while increasing the predictability of his own performance without sacrificing fluidity. To orchestrate suggests coordinating multiple elements with precision, and his game became a carefully balanced interaction between movement, timing, shot selection, and anticipation. This phase ensured that success could be repeated rather than merely achieved once, converting symbolic victory into sustainable performance. The mental dimension of his game also matured during this period, as decision-making became faster and more instinctive, allowing him to operate with clarity even under pressure. At the same time, his ability to maintain elegance while increasing efficiency distinguished him from others, as his play appeared effortless despite its underlying complexity. Technical maturation, therefore, represents the transition from brilliance to mastery, where talent becomes system and instinct becomes strategy. From this refined and stabilized foundation, his style evolved further into all-court artistry, where structure and creativity merged into a uniquely expressive form of dominance. All-court artistry. Evolving directly from technical maturation, all-court artistry allowed Roger Federer to improvise within a fully stabilized system and disarm opponents through a combination of creativity, precision, and unpredictability, transforming structured excellence into expressive mastery. Where earlier phases focused on building reliability, this stage revealed how control could coexist with freedom, allowing him to move seamlessly between calculated execution and spontaneous invention. All-court artistry refers to his distinctive playing style, defined by versatility across every area of the court and the ability to adapt dynamically to any situation. To improvise suggests creating solutions in the moment, and Federer demonstrated an extraordinary capacity to adjust his tactics instinctively, often anticipating outcomes before they fully developed. To disarm involves neutralizing an opponent's strengths, and he achieved this not through overwhelming force, but through subtle disruption, using placement, timing, and variation to unsettle even the most powerful competitors. This node builds directly upon technical maturation by showing how a stable foundation can support creative expansion, where discipline enables rather than restricts expression. The visual elegance of his game, often described as effortless, masked an intricate balance of calculation and intuition, making his style both effective and aesthetically compelling. Opponents frequently struggled not because they were overpowered, but because they were outthought and repositioned into disadvantage. All-court artistry therefore represents the fusion of structure and imagination, where mastery becomes not only functional but beautiful. Moving upward from all-court artistry through technical maturation and professional ascent to Roger Federer, his career then progressed into historic dominance, where consistency and artistry combined to produce an era defined by sustained excellence. Historic dominance. Moving upward from the fluid mastery of all-court artistry through technical maturation and professional ascent to Roger Federer, historic dominance marked the phase in which Roger Federer began to consolidate his achievements and redefine the very standard of excellence within professional tennis, transforming sustained success into an era that would be remembered as defining. What had previously been remarkable performances now became expected outcomes, as his consistency elevated him from exceptional competitor to central reference point within the sport. Historic dominance refers to this extended period during which his presence at the top of the game was not occasional, but continuous, shaping the competitive landscape around him. To consolidate suggests strengthening and stabilizing achievements, and Federer did not merely win titles, but reinforced his superiority through repeated success across surfaces and seasons. To redefine indicates altering established expectations, and his style, efficiency, and composure changed how both players and observers understood what peak performance could look like. This node shows how expressive mastery could translate into long-term control, where creativity did not lead to inconsistency, but instead supported sustained dominance. The psychological dimension of his influence became increasingly evident, as opponents often entered matches already aware of the challenge he presented, not only physically but mentally. At the same time, his ability to maintain elegance under pressure distinguished his dominance from purely aggressive or force-driven eras, making his reign both effective and aesthetically unique. Historic dominance therefore represents more than a series of victories. It defines a period in which one individual reshaped the structure and expectations of an entire sport. From this commanding position, his success expanded further within Grand Slam supremacy, where major titles became the primary measure of his enduring greatness. Grand Slam supremacy. Building directly upon the sustained control of historic dominance, Grand Slam supremacy allowed Roger Federer to accumulate victories at the most prestigious tournaments and entrench his position as the defining competitor of his era, transforming consistency into undeniable historical weight. While success on the tour as a whole already demonstrated superiority, it was within the Grand Slam events that true legacy was measured, and Federer repeatedly rose to meet and exceed those expectations. Grand Slam supremacy refers to his performance in these major tournaments, where pressure, visibility, and significance converge at their highest levels. To accumulate suggests gathering achievements steadily over time, and Federer's titles were not isolated triumphs, but part of a continuous pattern of excellence that reinforced his dominance. To entrench indicates establishing something so firmly that it becomes difficult to challenge or displace, and his repeated success at the highest level made his position appear almost unshakable. This note extends historic dominance by showing how sustained excellence could be concentrated into the most meaningful stages, ensuring that his impact was not only broad, but also deeply significant. The mental resilience required to perform repeatedly under such conditions highlighted the depth of his preparation and composure, as each tournament demanded not just skill but endurance and focus. At the same time, his ability to maintain elegance under extreme pressure further distinguished him, as success did not come at the cost of style. Grand Slam supremacy therefore represents the conversion of dominance into legacy, where repeated victories in the most important arenas solidified his place in history. From this accumulation of success, his career advanced into record accumulation, where numbers themselves began to reflect and confirm his lasting significance. Record accumulation. Extending directly from the sustained success of Grand Slam supremacy, record accumulation enabled Roger Federer to surpass existing milestones and cement his position within the historical framework of tennis, transforming repeated victories into measurable and enduring benchmarks. What had previously been dominance in performance now became dominance in numbers, where achievements could be quantified, compared, and preserved across generations. Record accumulation refers to the steady gathering of titles, finals, rankings, and longevity-based milestones that together constructed a statistical portrait of excellence. To surpass suggests exceeding previous limits, and Federer repeatedly moved beyond records that once seemed definitive, pushing the boundaries of what was considered achievable. To cement indicates establishing something firmly and permanently, and his accomplishments became embedded within the history of the sport, forming reference points for future players. This note builds upon Grand Slam supremacy by translating success into permanence, ensuring that his influence would not fade but remain visible through objective measures. The significance of these records extended beyond numbers themselves, as they represented consistency, durability, and the ability to perform at the highest level over extended periods. At the same time, his approach to achieving these milestones remained aligned with his broader identity, as elegance and composure continued to define his performances even as he accumulated achievements. Record accumulation therefore represents the stage at which dominance becomes documented legacy, where performance is preserved through quantifiable evidence. Moving upward from record accumulation through Grand Slam supremacy to historic dominance, his journey then continued into the rivalry epic, where new challenges would test and refine his greatness against equally formidable opponents. Rivalry epic. Moving upward from the firmly established achievements of record accumulation through Grand Slam supremacy to historic dominance, Rivalry epic marked the period in which Roger Federer was required to withstand the rise of equally exceptional competitors and elevate his performance in response to sustained and intense opposition, transforming dominance into a dynamic and evolving contest. What had once been a relatively stable hierarchy now became a shifting landscape, where victory could no longer be assumed but had to be continually earned against players capable of matching or exceeding his level in specific moments. Rivalry epic refers to this era defined by high-level competition against other all-time greats, where each match carried not only immediate significance, but also long-term historical implications. To withstand suggests enduring pressure without losing stability, and Federer demonstrated remarkable composure even when faced with prolonged challenges that tested both physical endurance and mental resilience. To elevate indicates raising performance to a higher level, and these rivalries pushed him to refine his strategies, increase his intensity, and adapt his game in ways that might not have been necessary in a less competitive environment. This note shows that greatness is not static, but must be continually defended and redefined in the presence of worthy opposition. The psychological dimension of these rivalries became especially significant, as anticipation, adaptation, and belief played crucial roles alongside technical skill. At the same time, these contests enhanced the narrative of his career, adding complexity and depth to his achievements by placing them within a broader competitive context. Rivalry epic, therefore, represents the transformation of dominance into dialogue, where greatness is shaped not only by individual performance, but by the presence of others who challenge and refine it. From this intense and evolving environment, his journey progressed into resilient reinvention, where adaptation became essential for longevity. Resilient reinvention. Building directly upon the demanding landscape of the rivalry epic, resilient reinvention allowed Roger Federer to recalibrate his approach and persevere through physical, tactical, and generational challenges, transforming adaptation into a defining strength of his longevity. As competition intensified and new rivals emerged with different styles and strengths, maintaining the same methods was no longer sufficient, requiring a continuous process of adjustment without losing core identity. Resilient reinvention refers to this repeated evolution, where success depended not only on ability, but on the willingness to change while preserving effectiveness. To recalibrate suggests making precise adjustments, and Federer refined elements of his game such as positioning, scheduling, and shot selection to remain competitive under changing conditions. To persevere involves continuing despite difficulty, and he demonstrated remarkable resilience by overcoming injuries, setbacks, and shifting competitive dynamics without abandoning his fundamental style. This node builds directly upon rivalry epic by showing that enduring greatness requires flexibility as well as strength, where adaptation becomes essential for survival at the highest level. The balance between innovation and consistency became increasingly important, as each adjustment had to enhance performance without disrupting the coherence of his game. At the same time, this phase revealed a deeper level of discipline, as maintaining motivation and focus over extended periods required sustained mental commitment. Resilient reinvention, therefore, represents the transformation of challenge into opportunity, where pressure becomes a catalyst for growth rather than decline. Moving upward from resilient reinvention through rivalry epic and historic dominance to Roger Federer, his career then extended into enduring legacy, where influence began to move beyond competition itself. Enduring legacy. Moving upward from the adaptive strength of resilient reinvention through rivalry epic and historic dominance to Roger Federer. Enduring legacy represents the phase in which Roger Federer's influence began to radiate beyond the boundaries of competition and endure as a lasting presence within both sport and global culture, transforming achievement into meaning that persists over time. While earlier stages of his career were defined by performance and results, this period reflects the broader impact of his identity, where recognition extends into admiration, inspiration, and collective memory. Enduring legacy refers to the sustained significance of his career after its competitive peak, encompassing not only records and titles, but also values, style, and emotional connection. To radiate suggests spreading influence outward, and Federer's presence continued to inspire players, audiences, and institutions long after individual victories had passed. To endure indicates lasting relevance, and his contributions remained visible and meaningful even as the competitive landscape evolved beyond his active participation. This node shows how adaptation and longevity contribute not only to continued performance, but to lasting influence, where persistence becomes a foundation for legacy. The qualities that defined his career, composure, elegance, and respect, became central to how he was remembered and referenced. At the same time, his ability to maintain dignity and clarity during transitions further strengthened his image, reinforcing the consistency of his identity across different stages of life. Enduring legacy, therefore, represents the transformation of a career into a symbol, where achievements are no longer confined to moments, but become part of an ongoing narrative. From this expansive and lasting influence, his role developed further within Global Ambassador, where visibility and credibility were directed toward broader global engagement. Global Ambassador. Extending naturally from the influence established in enduring legacy, Global Ambassador represents the stage in which Roger Federer began to galvanize international audiences and represent values that extended far beyond the boundaries of sport, transforming recognition into responsibility on a global scale. No longer defined solely by competition, his role expanded into one of visibility, connection, and symbolic representation, where his presence carried meaning across cultures and contexts. Global Ambassador refers to this broader public position, where credibility and admiration allowed him to engage with diverse audiences and initiatives worldwide. To galvanize suggests inspiring people into action, and Federer's influence encouraged engagement not only with tennis, but with broader ideas of excellence, respect, and perseverance. To represent indicates standing as a symbol for certain values, and he came to embody professionalism, humility, and consistency in a way that resonated universally. This node builds directly upon enduring legacy by demonstrating how sustained influence can be directed outward, transforming personal achievement into shared inspiration. His ability to communicate across cultures, rooted in his earlier multicultural household, became especially significant here, allowing him to connect authentically with people from different backgrounds. At the same time, his reputation for integrity strengthened the credibility of his involvement in various initiatives, ensuring that his presence added genuine value rather than superficial attention. Global Ambassador therefore represents the extension of identity into impact, where recognition becomes a platform for broader contribution. From this outward-facing role, his efforts deepened further within philanthropic vision, where influence was translated into tangible support and meaningful change. Philanthropic vision. Developing directly from the outward influence of Global Ambassador, philanthropic vision represents the stage in which Roger Federer chose to mobilize his resources and uplift communities through intentional and sustained charitable efforts, transforming visibility into meaningful and measurable impact. While his global recognition provided access and opportunity, this phase reflects the deliberate decision to use that position in service of others, particularly in areas where support could create long-term change. Philanthropic vision refers to his charitable mission, most notably focused on improving educational opportunities and access for children, especially in underserved regions. To mobilize suggests organizing resources, networks, and attention toward a defined objective, and Federer effectively directed both financial and social capital toward initiatives that could produce tangible outcomes. To uplift indicates improving conditions and creating opportunities for growth, and his efforts aimed not only to provide immediate assistance, but to support sustainable development over time. This node builds directly upon Global Ambassador by demonstrating how influence can be translated into action, where symbolic representation becomes practical contribution. The clarity and consistency of his approach reflected the same discipline that defined his athletic career, ensuring that his philanthropic work was not sporadic, but structured and purposeful. At the same time, his personal involvement added authenticity, reinforcing the connection between his public image and his actions. Philanthropic vision therefore represents the transformation of success into responsibility, where achievement becomes a means to create broader value. Moving upward from philanthropic vision through Global Ambassador to enduring legacy, his journey then moved toward final farewell, where the focus shifted from contribution to closure and reflection. Final farewell. Moving upward from the outward impact established through philanthropic vision through Global Ambassador to enduring legacy, final farewell represents the moment in which Roger Federer was required to confront the natural limits of his body and relinquish his role as an active competitor, transforming continuation into acceptance and presence into reflection. For an athlete whose identity had been shaped over decades through movement, performance, and competition, the decision to step away was not a sudden event, but the culmination of gradual awareness, where physical constraints and personal understanding aligned. Final farewell refers to this closing chapter of his professional career, where the focus shifted from achievement to transition, from performance to meaning. To confront suggests facing reality directly, and Federer approached this stage with clarity, acknowledging the limitations imposed by time and injury without denial or resistance. To relinquish involves letting go of something significant, and stepping away from the sport required releasing not only competition, but also the daily structure and identity that had defined much of his life. This node shows how responsibility and awareness extend into personal decisions, where understanding one's role includes knowing when to step aside. The emotional dimension of this moment was profound, as it involved both gratitude for what had been achieved and acceptance of what could no longer continue. At the same time, his approach to retirement reflected the same composure and dignity that characterized his playing career, ensuring that the transition itself became part of his legacy. Final farewell, therefore, represents not an ending in isolation, but a deliberate and thoughtful conclusion, where departure is shaped by understanding rather than necessity alone. From this moment of transition, his story reaches its symbolic closure within Laver Cup Goodbye, where farewell becomes shared experience and collective recognition. Laver Cup Goodbye. Emerging directly from the reflective transition of Final Farewell, Laver Cup Goodbye represents the moment in which Roger Federer chose to commemorate his career and embrace its conclusion within a shared and deeply symbolic setting, transforming personal departure into a collective and emotional experience. Rather than ending his journey in isolation, he allowed his final appearance to unfold within a team environment, surrounded by peers, rivals, and companions who had shaped and witnessed his career over many years. Laver Cup Goodbye refers specifically to this concluding event, where competition was no longer defined by individual ambition, but by shared participation and mutual recognition. To commemorate suggests honoring something with intention and reflection, and this farewell served as a structured acknowledgement of everything his career had represented, both in achievement and in influence. To embrace involves accepting something fully, and Federer approached this moment not with resistance, but with openness, allowing emotion, gratitude, and connection to define the experience. This node builds directly upon Final Farewell by transforming the private act of stepping away into a public moment of closure, where departure becomes not only an individual decision, but a shared acknowledgement of significance. The presence of fellow players, including those who had been rivals during the rivalry epic, added depth to the occasion, reinforcing the idea that his career existed within a broader narrative rather than in isolation. At the same time, the emotional resonance of this moment revealed the lasting impact of his journey, as admiration extended beyond performance into respect and affection. Laver Cup Goodbye, therefore, represents the final expression of his enduring legacy, where the conclusion of competition becomes a celebration of meaning, connection, and continuity, ensuring that while his presence on the court ended, his influence continues to endure beyond it. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more English lessons.